Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here, get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to talk about the author Michael Crichton and his book Travels. Well, Travels is his autobiography, and of course Michael Crichton was a fascinating man, a medical doctor who graduated from Harvard Medical School, has written some of the most influential books of his time in terms of science fiction, and has been transferred to some of the greatest movies of all time, at least some of the most higher grossing ones, things like Andromeda Strain, Jurassic Park, and a lot of people may think Spielberg, but Spielberg just produced and directed that. It was written by Michael Crichton, and I think he had a fair amount to do with some of the script there and everything else. So this guy has been in-depth in a long list of the top writers of science fiction and producers of TV shows. He was the person who wrote the very popular series that ran for 15 years, ER. It just goes on and on with the list of things he's done, but few people understand that this giant of a man, 6'9", was a medical doctor with a degree from Harvard Medical School, probably considered the best medical school in the world. Certainly a difficult one to get through and to perform at. So we have to give this guy a lot of credit, at least in regular society thinking. But he wasn't just a clone of the scientific establishment. He was a person who thought past that, and we can tell that in his very fascinating writings. Westworld was one of them, and he was involved in the new series to some extent, or wrote that as well, the foundation for that before he died. Now, he did die at 66 from leukemia in 2008, I believe. So he's been gone for quite some time, and that's why you don't see as much here. But I don't know of anybody who's left such a legacy of writing except Stephen King, and especially things that have been made into classic movies. A lot of Stephen King movies that have been made are fairly bad and never really made that much. When you talk about Jurassic Park and these type of things on the series of Jurassic Park, you're talking about some of the highest grossing films ever. Well, people love dinosaurs. But the concept, of course, was started by Michael Crichton. But there's much more to him. His book, Travels, is his autobiography. And he talks about his life, growing up, etc. And I've always been attracted to these kind of books. So I don't read any really fiction of any great extent. I never have. I don't find fiction very interesting. It's all ifs, ands, or buts, and I prefer to learn about the real world, which is much stranger than fiction. Truth out there, what really is going on, certainly is a fascinating thing to read and is usually unbelievable. So fiction and science fiction, you can kind of concept there, and you can think how, well, this is very possible, and it's based on a lot of things happening. Reality is unbelievable. So he went through all of this, and of course he was a child of the 60s. He graduated, I think, from Harvard in 1960, medical school, and went into the medical profession, wrote a couple of, 2 or 3 nonfiction books. One of them was about his experiences in the medical industry. He didn't stay very long, but and unfortunately he should have put more time into that. But the bottom line with him is that he was very metaphysical. He went out and experienced things, astral projection, mind power, reincarnation, all the things that were very popular back then, and he went personally to investigate them. He went to the Mental Physics Institute in Joshua Tree, California, a place where I lived close to and had been many times to. Well, he went there and took classes which were very popular in the late 60s and 70s, where people went there and still do. It's a fascinating area of research, and here's a guy who was open enough not to think that there's something strange about basic psychic empowerment, or all these things that have basically been done for thousands of years and have been heavily researched for the last 150 years. He wasn't closed-minded enough to disregard this. A matter of fact, he saw how bad the medical system was and how they didn't work very well, and was looking for alternatives. But I don't know if it was the time or not, but this was the big time where people were seeking. which is the 60s, which had a great push on what we're even doing today. They opened a lot of the doors, and a lot of things that we think are common today are because of what happened in the 60s, which brought in a lot of Eastern mysticism, brought in reincarnation, psychic power, even quantum physics to be understood at a higher level. So all this started then, and he was kind of involved in all this. But he was smart enough to go out there and investigate these things. So it's important because, a lot of people in the alternative sciences like IGOS and the people I speak with and myself in general, everybody feels a little put upon, that we are looked at as kind of laughable stooges, that we believe in nonsense. Well, this isn't true at all. The alternative sciences are basically understood and followed by 99% of the people. They just will not admit it because they don't want the ridicule. People like him and others, when they give talks in places, after the talk, people come up and pat them on the back saying, I fully agree with you. They're not going to stand in the audience and do that because they don't want to take the ridicule from the people that are there. So people believe a lot of stuff, but they're not going to come out and say that. So that's really unfortunate as well, because it allows as a society works. Society works by basically hoodlums, a few people who run the world. And, it's in school. You got the punks in the school that run the school. The administration does nothing, and an entire student body is terrorized by 4 or 5 people. This is how the world works. So people are not going to stand up. People are never going to get into controversy with anybody. They're gonna follow behind slavishly the thoughts given to them by their bogus, ignoramus, mental case teachers and take this to be fact. So it goes on and on with this. So we all need to fully understand the realities of society in general, but he was able to break away from that, and he was able to make a lot of money, and I guess this helped him do that. He was able to sell his writing very easily, and he made lots and lots of money, and unfortunately, it's too bad he didn't do something with that money a little greater than he did towards the end of his life. So, which seems to be virtually nothing. I don't know if he supported people or not, gave money to places, but who knows with all this, people tend to be so closed-mouthed, it's kind of silly. But here's a guy that could have come out and do a lot more. He didn't. But what he did do is investigate all this. He took classes in all of these alternative reality. And this should be some comfort to people like us that believe in all this stuff, know it's as real as a heart attack, and never get any respect because of it, because we allow dumbbells, which are basically your dumb bunkers and skeptics, who are made up of the unbelievably scummiest people on the planet, and all they do is talk goo-goo, goo-goo, kindergarten, outdated science. Your Penn Gillettes, the clown school graduate, the high school dropout. We go on and on. Brian Dunning, convicted felon. The unamazing Randy. All of these people. He's a guy who never graduated high school either. So, and has a list of deviant activities apparently he was involved in, so it is alleged. So, all of these things that go on with these kind of people, this is who the front line of the dumb bunkers and skeptics. The head of the Skeptical Society doesn't even have a degree in science. He has a degree in psychology or some other area like that with a PhD in science history, whatever that is. All of these people have been shoved in our face as representing the regular society when they really don't. And any real scientist will not get on that train because they know they're on a very shaky train because there's no proof against all this stuff. And we must remember that the psychic sciences, the occult sciences, have been researched by top professionals in the field for over 150 years, and it continues to go. There's huge amounts of research that was done that was never released by SRI. A matter of fact, 15, 20 years of research that is sitting in some CIA vault. Now, getting back to his autobiography, the name of his book is Travels, And this is where he talks about his international adventures and experimentation with mysticism, out-of-body experiences, astral projection, fortune telling, and there's a whole chapter which is very fascinating on spoon bending, where he at the mental physics organization there in Joshua Tree bent spoons himself with a whole bunch of groups. Now, this has been something that people have been stating is impossible. It's all magical. Goo magic. Well, this is what, we need to really define these dangerous, psychopathic, ignorant buffoons that the skeptic and debunkers put up in front of you. So it's really important that we understand who these people are and what they're doing. So here's a guy, a medical doctor who graduated from Harvard, whose lives have been in his hands, is at a place where he's seeing a whole group of people bend spoons, and he did it himself. Now, Sean Carroll says, it's impossible. Just get your vaccinations and do what society tells you. I'm a theoretical physicist, so I throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Then I take pictures. And they pay me a lot to do nothing. So this is the kind of thing. So, when you speak ignorant like that, how can you give anybody any kind of possible credit for anything? So if that's how their minds are working, what kind of researchers are they? Well, here's a guy who went out and did it. And he looked into these things. He had many different experiences, which were just shockingly accurate and amazing. And it's all detailed in the book. I'm not going to go into this here. People should read this book. If you are a success scientist, if you're an occult scientist, if you're in this entire area, well, here's a very credible person, and this is his book. Don't read his fiction. Read Travels. This is a fantastic book of a scientist, a noted, intelligent medical doctor doing research directly, not getting it secondhand, not going and sitting in some room reading research material. He went out and experienced it, right down to this whole chapter on spoon bending. So it's quite exciting to see that and his experiences with it, and he talks about how it happened and how people were able to do it right there. Yeah, Sean Carroll, there is energies out there that can do all this. Has been proven thousands, millions of times over thousands of years, and you're living in a sewer hole of stupidity. And you're the kind of people that are dragging us down. Now, it's unfortunate that Crichton didn't do something about this, set up some sort of experimental institute, pour some of his millions into research here. And this is one of the problems. Nobody does that. People are afraid to. They don't want to be labeled. That's all part of the subtle crimes against humanity that these dumb bunkers and idiot skeptics are doing. They are suppressing breakthroughs dramatically. They are hurting society to the highest possible level, keeping us stuck in dumb, stupid, backward science that goes back 500 years to freaks, weirdos, and deviants, or 100 years to a guy who married his cousin. I'm dying. So the whole idea is that who never got it right, who was basically a retard as a child. And his math, even to this day, is very faulty. So the point is that when we get into all this stuff, we need to understand the facts of it. So we're stuck with these idiots that have given us basic principles that may be a starting point, but certainly aren't a finishing point. And now that we're stuck in this old reality, we can't move past it. And this is really sad. And that's because nobody is got the courage enough to come out and support the alternative philosophies, etc. Now, here's a guy that, again, you can hold up there. This isn't some Raji Maji, some New Age goofball like Shirley MacLaine standing on a rock screaming she's God while counting her billions. So the whole idea is that this is a credible person. A scientific person, at least as a society. So I don't know what he is as a human being or what he's done, etc. But we're always looking for people that have a certain background. Someone coming out like me and talking about these things has little credibility because I don't have all these degrees behind me from noted colleges that give. But even if you do, you not taken seriously. And people that do have degrees are not apt to come out and talk about this. We saw that with the extraterrestrial research done by John Mack, who also, was he Yale or Harvard psychiatrist or psychologist, who came out with all this information and was terrorized at his school. So that's not what education is about. And of course, that's what tenure is supposed to be about, that you're guaranteed a job no matter what you say, which can, as a cutting-edge sword, a double-bladed sword, so to speak, which can cause you problems, obviously, because it allows some cranks. But what is a crank? We need cranks. We need people that go out and say outrageous stuff to get you thinking. So here it is. Read this book. Understand what it's like. He talks about his life. He talks about living in LA. He talks about his medical days, which he was only in medicine like 4 years. He talks about his experiences around the world, and very interesting. London Psychics. He went to Ireland. My father's death. Pyramids of the Magicians. Kilimanjaro. Elephant attacks. Bangkok, gorillas, sharks, Shangri-La. These are all the things these are chapters in his book, which I think is seeing headhunters, life on the astral plane, seeing auras, an entity, direct experience. So these are all the things. He also talks about how valid, and I think one of the best written summations of the validity of psychic empowerment. Of course, that's a terrible word. I like to use the word the biophysical, because I think that sounds a lot better, because people have trashed psychic, or at least the nutball Christians and other people. This has come down to be a word equivalent to gypsy. So the whole idea is that he defines this in a very deep way, showing you in I don't know if it's 3 or 4 pages, but probably the best written explanation of psychic power and how it works, and giving you many insights. So this is something that everybody should read and even memorize. And he ends this whole little, I don't know if it's 5 or 10 pages or even a chapter. I don't remember. I don't have the book handy right now. But he ends this with how one of the aspects of our life, which is totally psychic, which people don't really think about, or of course don't talk about. And maybe that's one reason it's not talked about. And that is sex. Because sex is 100% psychic. I mean, generally nothing happens in your sexual reality unless you're, quote, turned on. Now, turned on is a psychic state. So if you're not turned on, and we don't, people are turned on and have fetishes for everything. But the point is, it doesn't matter. It's a psychic state. So you have to think about things, particularly males or females as well, to get sexually aroused. So what is that? Isn't that psychic power? Isn't that your brain saying something and getting a very strong physical reality that has to be maintained for a fairly long period of time to bring it to a crescendo, so to speak? So he talks about that, and I think that's a very interesting area that most people don't understand or get into, and that is the fact that we do psychic stuff in our lives all the time, and it's not just in other areas, it's in the sexual area, which is 100% psychic-based. So the bottom line, if you're not turned on, which is a psychic thought, or you can get yourself turned on, cause major physical reactions within your body, generate all sorts of chemicals just by thinking something sexual. So something to really take note. But he has a whole little chapter or a little statement on that, but I believe in the back of his book, that should be the anthem of all people involved in alternative and the psychic sciences. So this is a great book. The rest of the stuff, as I said, I'm not a actual fiction enthusiast, and while I find the movies fun, Jurassic Park, etc. And of course, there is hard science behind this that he gets into in each one of his books. These are all talks about science that is pending, things that could happen in the future. So it's not just science fiction of these things are based on some fantasy. So he has that weaved into his books. But I'd prefer to read more hard science or something that is non-fiction in nature than to read these kind of books. But certainly it has opened up an entire new audiences to people to give them scientific principles and have them to think about it, of all of his books. And a lot of his books certainly have made great movies, and they probably are a good read if you like that. Going back in time to medieval times and helping those people with modern understanding. It's a quite fascinating thing. I think we've all thought about that. What if I could time travel and help out these people in ancient times? Bring a machine gun there or something. So the whole idea is, I think these concepts are great. And of course, cloning and taking DNA and making dinosaurs. Well, this is kind of happening right now. We've got DNA from, apparently, that can be used from very ancient mammoths and other things, which I don't know if you consider them dinosaurs, but certainly go back many, many thousands and thousands of years. So these are fascinating areas and something that anyone who's a manifesting scientist will find fascinating. And this is the real world coming from a real successful, educated person. And that's always nice to see. Until next time.